Hey, everybody. It's Kevin from the podcast Behind Beautiful Things, which is a mental health and storytelling podcast. You may be listening to this in that feed. I want to do a little something different today, a little special outside of our normal area of operation where we have great guests come on and tell stories. This week, I wanted to bring on a friend of mine to talk about an amazing class that he's going to be teaching. Now, his name is Brad. Brad has been in journalism and has been writing for over 30 years. He used to work as an adventure journalist, which sounds pretty fucking cool to me. And he has this new class. Now, I've taken a class with Brad before, and we're going to get into why that was so impactful for me, and I think a lot of other people in the class. But I wanted to introduce Brad. He was on our show last year, and we'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. But this is his name's Brad Wetzler. He's written the book Into the Soul of the World, which is one of the better memoirs I've ever read. It's really fantastic. It's very honest and raw and beautifully written. And also, you can learn more about what he's doing at bradwetzler.com. That's WETZLER.com. So, yeah. Hey, Brad, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well today. How you doing, Kevin? It's good to see you.
Hey, man. Good to see you as well. I'm hanging in there. It's kind of sunny, and I got some sparkling water, so you can't beat it.
I got my
Uh,
sparkling water too, so no, you can't beat it.
yeah. I want to talk first about the class that you invited me to that we did late last year and early this year, and that is a memoir writing class. Now, since I can remember, I've wanted to write a memoir, and I have hundreds of thousands of words of writing. So I was honored to be invited to the class. But the thing that really struck me about that class was each week, I'd say there were about 9 or 10 of us in there, and every person got to read the work, that either that was assigned or the quick reading and writing lessons we were doing within the class. And you paid special attention to each person and you gave meaningful feedback each time, which I don't think is easy to do when you're teaching writers, because everybody who's a writer, they're like, this is what I'm doing, this is my soul, tell me what to do with it. And you did such a good job of being present with everyone and making sure that everybody got the feedback that they needed and the direction that they needed. So before we talk about your new class, tell us in that memoir writing class what your goal was there, and then we'll transition into your new class that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so the memoir writing class, which I still teach, I teach it several times a year. You know, I just think everybody has a story to tell, and we've all been through things. We've all been had our own version of suffering, and also our own wins and losses, and times we've felt transcendent and connected to belonging. And I just feel like everybody has a story to tell, and with some very simple tools that I've kind of figured out and leaned on other teachers, but also just developed as a writer over the past 30 years. I present these tools as a way to connect with your story and then to connect with the meaning of your story. And so I love teaching these classes because I see that with a little bit of guidance, somebody can take a lot of years of frustration, a lot of trying to write a story, and they can lean into finally telling that story and drawing the meaning and the and finding the message that they want to share with the world. And so I guess thank you for your compliments. I feel like, from a very young age, at 24, I was an editor and I learned how to give feedback. I learned how to see what's missing in a piece, but also what's really strong about it. And then later, when I became a coach, and also did a hell of a lot of therapy, I learned to kind of for that feedback in a kinder, more present way, maybe through all the inner work I've done too. When I was a young Turk, I didn't always give feedback quite so uh, with such presence, I guess. It's something I've learned over the years to really honor people's stories. And so thanks for that question.
Yeah, and it's definitely clear that you are somebody who's really committed to being present with each of the artists or each of the members of your class. And of course, memoir writing class was a writing class. But this one that you're talking about, and you're launching April 8th, is that correct? April 8th, 2025?
April 8th, that's correct.
Awesome. Uh, it's called Writing the Soul. Now, uh, tell us what that means, and then let's talk about the soul itself. So, why did you title this class "Writing the Soul"?
Well, I think first of all, I wanted to teach a class that invited people who may want to write a book but may not. People who scribble and journal in the morning sometimes, and wonder if they might have a story, but maybe will never want to write a story. I wanted to find a class that would serve people that would use writing as a tool for self-exploration and maybe personal growth and if you are, a religious or spiritual person, which you don't need to be, maybe connecting with this deeper part of you. And so I kind of came up with this writing the soul idea as a way, I've always thought about the soul. It's a big word. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Maybe sometimes New Age people use it really flippantly. But I think it's a word that has depth and meaning, and it really is the place in us that's the deepest, most perhaps wisest, most essential part of us underneath the roles we play in life, underneath our personalities. And some of you out there might think of it in religious terms, and I would welcome you to do that. Others, maybe it's a new way of thinking about it to you, and you can maybe let go of some of the religious connotations it might have for you and just think of it like this essence of yourself. And maybe it's sort of like I think of it like a walnut versus the walnut tree. It's sort of like it's that part of you that has an imprint of who you are. Maybe it even has a roadmap for what you were uh, destined to do in life, and it sort of has that inner DNA. And so it's some part of you that you can connect with, and it might have information for you when you do. And so I created a course that allows writing to connect to that place and explore. And we're going to have six different teachers. It's an 8-week class, but I've organized it so there's six different co-teachers from various walks of life, and we're going to look at kind of this exploratory writing from different angles. One of them is an embodied sex therapist, and we're going to look at it from the body's point of view. One's a poet. Another one is a interfaith minister. Another is a memoirist who's written really about having some serious pain and suffering she's experienced in losing a child as a toddler, and had her own challenges with being born and having had one of her legs amputated.
Oh,
Uh, so all these different teachers are going to be coming from different angles and really bringing a new perspective and new energy, and they'll be leading us through writing exercises too, not just lecturing. So,
right. And the writing and listen, that's a broad swath of things, and I think that's great because sometimes I guess a common conception I think unless if for people who want to write, well, I don't know what I want to write about, and people say, oh, well, write what you know, but you just kind of went through a whole spectrum of kind of the lived experience there, right? Or expressions of it, and um, so it's called writing the soul. Now, do you feel like what soul writing is different than traditional writing? And if so, how?
yeah, I think one of the things I do in my memoir class, I do teach technique, and I teach people,
Right.
the craft of writing. And most people, when you take a writing class, that's what you learn. You learn techniques, um, to tell better stories, to learn to reflect on the stories, and so that class is sort of heavy with that kind of information. And I wanted to try a class that sort of was free of a lot of that. I'll give some very basic tools to help people, harness their thoughts and stories. But for the most part, it's going to be driven by, generative writing and by, guided journaling, where I offer prompts and tell people to explore where their minds and pens might go with these prompts. And so it'll be more free form. Uh, um, and more exploratory. And so that's kind of what I mean by that.
Okay, that's great. And I love what you said about the pens and where their pens and minds go. As somebody who writes relatively often, one of my favorite things about writing is I'll start a sentence, like to start whatever I'm writing, and I'm like, I'm writing about A. And then about two paragraphs in, I'm all of a sudden writing about B.
Yeah.
And I didn't really even think about it, but I'd switch topics. And it just kind of, you start thinking you're going to write about one thing, and that kind of stays there. But you also have other things come in, and because your brain is making all these connections, and it's actually kind of at least in my experience, a really thrilling experience to be like, oh, what's coming next? Creativity is so enlivening. It makes you live in the moment.
Definitely, and I think you know, our bodies have wisdom and our unconscious has things to say. And when you start moving the pen, it does start to blur the difference between mind and body. It does, your body starts to take it places, your hand starts to take it places that are not necessarily where the ego, where your planning mind wants to go. And so it's a
Yes.
beautiful thing, and I know that, the artist's way has been a really popular way of exploring, kind of morning pages and honoring the wisdom of the body and the soul and the unconscious. And this course will have some similarities to it, but it has my own way of thinking about this too. But yeah, there's it's one of the things when I teach writing. I have students who really love to plan, and I do work on structure and we work on an outline, but I'm also so aware of how, yeah, the story wants to go where the story wants to go. And a big part of writing is listening to where it wants to go. So we'll be talking a lot. Listening is kind of a good word for this course, rather than
Mm.
controlling and having, our egos tell us what we want to write based on what we think is right. We're going to really explore letting other forces that are inside us take the writing where it wants to go.
Yeah, and you talked about a body expert, what was it? A body
Yeah, a
sex.
somatic therapist.
Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, so well, traditional therapy involves basically, thinking and talking and telling stories, and over the last 20, 30 years has developed what's called somatic experiencing therapy. And in that therapy, you really, rather than just letting your mind run away, it's a form of therapy that's really good for trauma, because sometimes when you tell a story, you'll start to run away with the story, your emotions will get caught up in it, and suddenly you're almost re-experiencing the trauma at the same time. So
Mm.
some people develop this other kind of therapy where as you start to tell a story, you become very aware of what's happening in your body. You might need to slow the story down. You might pause the story just to feel what's going on in your body and let it process and let the trauma subside. Um, so it's just so we're bringing her in, and she's going to be talking about. She's actually a specialist in sex therapy too, but talking about the not sex in terms of how we might think about it normally, but life force,
Uh-huh.
and sort of like bringing more life force into your writing, and paying attention to your body as you write as a way to stay grounded. Some people who take this course might have some trauma, and not allowing that trauma to take over the writing and take over the mind, and let stay grounded.
So when you say like, the question I'm thinking of is like, what does the body have to do with writing? And are you saying that being aware of the body while you're writing and allowing that to play a part in the and where the story that you're telling goes, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, you're right. I mean, and it sounds crazy. It sounds maybe new agey, but the body knows. I mean, when you have a gut reaction, when you say no to something, someone tells you they want you to do something, and you just know in your body it's a no. The body contains wisdom, but more than that, you know, when I was writing my memoir, I was processing trauma at the time, and one thing I learned was the power of keeping one foot in the present moment one foot grounded in like feeling the earth underneath my feet, feeling the chair underneath my butt, and allowing then myself to the other part of me to go back into the past and tell that story and mine that my mind for information about that. And if you don't stay present in the moment and feel physical reality, you can get lost. Like I was telling you, you can go back in, suddenly you find yourself weeping and really kind of an out of control way. And so she'll be offering ways for us to explore, what's stories and what else is in our minds and bodies that we're not aware of.
Yeah, I love that because our society, meaning here in the US at least, um, we seem to think often that under, up the neck and up is what's really going on in life, and we forget about our body, because we're having the thoughts up here, so we're thinking, well, that's running the show, but that's not necessarily true. And to incorporate all of that into the writing, especially if you're trying to go deep into, as you said, maybe some traumatic events or emotional wounds. I mean, I've been writing since, I don't know, I was 5 or something, 6. And I did it, I think, subconsciously without even thinking about it because I was hurting about one thing or another.
Hmm?
And the way that I understood to make sense of it was to write it.
Yeah.
I often say that I like to write about things because it helps me figure it out. So obviously, and tell me if you disagree with this, I think you agree, but obviously writing is a salve for traumatic events, for emotional wounds, and can help us heal with both.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. When I wrote my memoir, I really felt in the end when I got finished with it like I had processed and almost kind of tied up loose ends that had felt so um, maybe jagged inside me and felt like they were unprocessed. And when you recast your story, all the memories you have, and when you cast it as a story, particularly as an empowered story, I think sometimes we live life and we can feel unempowered. We can get lost in addiction and depression, and we can feel powerless. And that might, feel true at the time. But when you tell your story, if you tell it, even though there's a little bit of a hero's journey, not in the sense of, you're making yourself into a hero, but that you are going on that you tell your story like you've gone on a journey and you've discovered new things about yourself. And maybe in the end, you found out that you kind of had inside you all the things you really needed to live the life you wanted to live. And I'm not talking about a rosy ending. I'm just talking about telling an
Right.
empowered story. That becomes your memory. I mean, there's science now that every time we have a memory, we are essentially the version of the memory that we remember is the most recent version. And so if you tell your life story that way, kind of becomes, it replaces a lot of the confusion and the chaos of life and becomes a more manageable story and one that you can own.
Yeah, and I think people may also, if they're listening to this, they may also wonder, um, well, if I'm writing about difficult times in my life, will I be able to open up? And if I'm writing about difficult times in my life, how am I going to access that and still, quote, be creative?
Yeah.
In all of your years of doing journalism, of writing nonfiction, can you tell us just a little bit about the intersectionality of fact and creation when you're doing
Yeah.
narrative nonfiction?
So memoir is an art form. It's creative writing. It's not journalism. I did a lot of journalism in my life, magazine journalism, and memoir. I think the word that needs to be kind of focused on in memoir is honesty, not necessarily truth. And I don't mean
Ah,
by any way that you're making things up. That's not the point. That my point is that you're telling the story of your life, and particularly in memoir, often a narrow version of that story based around the certain themes you want to write about. So, um, when you write a memoir, then you're kind of focusing and making a smaller slice of the pie. And I'm sorry, Kevin, I lost track of the question that there
oh
is.
no, you're fine. So it was kind of a convoluted question. So I think what I was saying is when people want to write something so deeply personal to them, as I think will come out in this, how do I think some people might be worried to be like, well, does that mean I just write, A, this painful thing happened, B, that's how it made me feel, C, here I am today? Like, what kind of creative flourishes, can come to that, if that's making sense?
Yeah. Well, again, sort of this idea, maybe you want to lean into this hero's journey as I was talking about,
Yeah.
where you you know, yes, maybe you were a victim in your life, and that's very true, and you tell that story, but that's also not the end of the story. All of us, whether you had, childhood neglect or abuse, or whether you had something as an adult, eventually you find yourself in the situation of having to heal yourself. You have to figure out the path forward for yourself. And I find that the stories that tell the story of what happened, but also show how you retained your power and how you retained your strength and overcame these um, the hurdles, and even the suffering that you had as a real victim. When you transcend that, and tell the positive story of your recovery, it not just helps people, it helps people out there, and it also helps
Yes.
yourself.
Yes, there's the catharsis in the telling, there's the catharsis in the creating, which I think are two different things.
Yeah.
And so let's
I really want to
kind of
jump in
wrap.
and emphasize that helping people thing. With Memoir, you end up offering someone a roadmap, and you'll be surprised that while your circumstances were different, the universal truths, the things that come through in your story, really will give somebody else a roadmap that I think is even more powerful than a self-help book that tells you what to do. You get to live, you experience the lived experience of somebody, and find your own solutions based on what the path that I had to take and write about. So, but again, in this particular course, it's we're going to be less into that memoir writing and more into kind of finding what's underneath all of this, and maybe what's going to come out of it is you'll have the desire to write a memoir, and you'll have the raw material for it. So it'll be less though about crafting it.
Yeah. And something we say on Behind Beautiful Things is, stories are the great healing currency of humankind. The more we hear, the more we heal. And I think what's so powerful about what you just said, and what this class will help people do, is for them to be able to reach deep within themselves and tell their story, not only, again, helping themselves as they process through it, but then putting something out there in the world that somebody else can hear, and then maybe feel less alone, or as you so aptly put it, have a roadmap for how they may be able to use that story in their own lives. So, you know, we're talking about soul, we're talking about all of that. Why would you say that writing is a sacred practice?
Yeah, I think writing, again, kind of coming back to this the body aspect of it. It's first of all, our minds are wired for story, and so we're constantly trying to take the chaos of our lives and turn into something, that makes sense, and maybe something that for somebody else. And so I think there's something very sacred about the way that writing and putting what's the contents of your mind into the physical world, onto a piece of paper or onto your computer that you then can print out. It's an experience that's it just, I don't know, to me it connects me with the deepest part of myself, and it feels to me as sacred as, in the morning I do have practices, I light candles, I meditate, and for me it's every bit as sacred as that, because we're mining the our story. We're storytelling animals, and we're spiritual beings too, I believe. And so there's just this way that connects all of these things, in a way that is tangible and that you can share with somebody else.
Yeah, and it's kind of like at the end of the class, it sounds like one of the goals is that in regards to our soul, we'll be understanding where some of the deepest wisdom inside of us wants to take us. And then
Mhm.
having done that class, can now go into the world and continue those practices that you learn in the class to help you and others around you heal. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. And again, that's that you just nailed it. My hope for this class is that people will get underneath the noise of their lives. They'll be able to walk away from, the news on the TV and the podcast. Although I love podcasts,
Yeah.
podcasts, but to be able to turn down the noise of their lives and connect with something that might tell them, and maybe it'll be scary. Maybe when you turn down all the noise of your life, you realize that it's time to change jobs, or maybe it's time to leave that relationship, or maybe it's time to make a big decision and step into some new area of your life. And so often, we can't hear those things when we're surrounded by you know, all the technology we use, and even our
Mm.
families, and all the voices and responsibilities we have. So this is an opportunity to turn down the volume of the external world and go into our souls. And when I say that again, you don't have to be religious or spiritual. This is like going into your very essence and trying to find that wisdom that is there, that is there. I mean, when you've gone on a hike, or you've taken just a walk, or listened to a favorite piece of music, and suddenly you connect with some part of you that says, "Wow, this life is wild, and this it's and potent, and I can connect with something more than just my 9 to 5 job and my current situation in life, and I can connect with some part of that's wise and deep, and sort of like maybe infinitely deep." So who knows? I mean, we can talk about the all the religious or spiritual versions of soul. This is not about that. This is about connecting with you at your deepest level.
Absolutely, and it's about yeah, to me at least. I'm excited to get started because it's also about pulling. When you say connecting to yourself at the deepest level, it's all of a sudden you're like, I have all of this within me. Maybe
Yeah.
I didn't know some of it, but I found it through this writing. I can better understand my soul, and thus can maybe live a different life. So, um, Brad, like I said, April 8th, I'm pretty fucking excited about it. Tell us where people can go to sign up and join the class.
Yeah, so go to my website, bradwetzler.com, and that's BradWetzler.com, and click on the link for Writing the Soul, and there'll be a page there that describes the course in detail, that describes all the different co-teachers. They're amazing people. One of them's a Guggenheim Fellow. It's
Wow.
an incredible group of people that are going to be teaching. They're all friends of mine. And then there's and you can purchase the course there, and so it starts April 8th. It's 8 weeks long. It meets Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, which would be 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and 10 a.m. Pacific Time. And we'll meet for
Let's
eight
not
weeks.
forget our good old Central friends at noon. Sorry. Sorry.
Absolutely. What is that? Noon Chicago time.
Noon. Damn right.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Uh, so anyway, that's the details of it, and I would love to see you there. I've got a great group of people already signed up, and there's room for more. And really would love to take you on this journey, and with my co-teachers, and just see where you go, and it could be life changing.
Yeah, I'm not bullshitting when I say I'm really excited about this because creativity is one of the highest states. It's I adore creativity, I adore art, and I think this is going to be a great way into both. So, Brad, Writing the Soul starting April 8th, and go to bradwetzler.com to sign up, and hopefully